because I know the truth. Ain't none of you put me on the set, and ain't none of you gonna kick me off the set.
Nipsey's passing has always been wrapped in tension, mystery, and too many questions that never got real answers. But now, after years of staying quiet, Snoop finally stepped into that courtroom and spoke with his chest. "'Cause I know the truth. Ain't none of you. S put me on the set, and ain't none of you is gonna kick me off."
Were you there that day?
Yes, I was. Guy rolled up, Nipsey's out hanging, signing autographs or whatever. Guy rolled up. I don't know what his intentions was. As I replay it, I just replay it over and over, and I wish I could have done something differently. I wish I'd have never left his side.
And just like that, people started whispering that Snoop might have just snitched on Big U, and maybe even exposed his own involvement in the chaos surrounding that tragic day. But the real shocker isn't what he said. It's why he chose to break his silence now. Snoop's apology was something nobody expected, and when he opened his mouth, the whole courtroom went dead quiet like someone hit pause on life.
And I had never heard that. I had never heard the Nipsey Hussle conspiracy that Big U had that something to do with it, right? But let me get to a little deeper question. The rumor has it is that Nip came up to this guy and said, "I can't hang with you, or we can't be around because he was a rat," right?
Right.
Let me ask you a question. It's kind of harsh. Was Nipsey supposed to say that? If you're not in the streets no more, is your opinion on the streets that valid? I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand it was two things. Let me ask you this, because what bothers me the most is when people say he got killed by one of his own homeboys.
The bombshell he dropped had everyone staring, frozen in disbelief. Snoop didn't just apologize for old ties or street connections. He went even further, pointing straight at one of the most respected and feared figures in Los Angeles street politics. Big U, yes, you're hearing this right. In a wild twist nobody saw coming, Snoop's own words tied Big U to the conspiracy theories that have been swirling around Nipsey Hussle's tragic murder for years.
I'm gonna miss him. The world misses him. It's great what he's done for the world. I'm gonna miss his smile. I'm gonna miss him just rolling up on me. I'm gonna miss his advice. He give me books to read. It's just so many things I'm gonna miss about him.
And if that wasn't enough, the way Snoop laid it out had insiders whispering a word nobody ever thought would be connected to his name: snitch. The streets don't play around with that label, and hearing it floating around Snoop sent shockwaves everywhere. But let's rewind for a minute. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just a rapper. He was Crenshaw's pride, a man who gave back, uplifted his community, and stayed tied to the streets that shaped him. His death in March 2019 wasn't just heartbreaking. It created a storm of rumors, finger-pointing, and theories that never stopped coming. Some said it was a street dispute gone wrong. Others believed there were bigger forces behind the scenes. And one name that kept coming up again and again: Big U, Nipsey's former manager, a figure respected and feared across Los Angeles.
All you talking about, Snoop can't come to the hood. He can do whatever I like when I like. Second of all, you 50 years old. You can't get a job, cuz? You mad at me, cuz? Because I won't help you no more?
To understand why Snoop's courtroom words hit so hard, you gotta understand where Big U stands in all this. He wasn't some outsider, and he wasn't just a mentor. He was deeply involved in Nipsey's rise, the business moves, and even the tensions that came with success and street territory. That's why hearing Snoop mention him in court shook the room. Now fast forward to Snoop himself, a global icon, businessman, cultural figure, and straight-up superstar. But no matter how big he gets, his roots stay in Long Beach, tied to the Crip set and the streets that raised him. So when he speaks on a situation this serious, the whole world pays attention. And that's exactly what happened when Snoop took the stand. With carefully chosen words, he admitted to past mistakes, apologized to the court, to the families, to the fans, and to Nipsey's memory. But then came the moment that left everyone stunned.
There was some sort of situation that happened, some sort of shootout with you, Nipsey, LAPD, something.
No, that was what, 7 years ago? It wasn't no shooting. It wasn't no shooting. It was a family dispute. That's my little brother, you know what I'm saying? I love him to death.
According to several accounts, Snoop pointed directly at Big U's influence in creating the situation that eventually led to Nipsey's murder. To many people listening, that didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like cooperation with authorities. And in street culture, cooperation has a very loud label attached to it: snitching. But here's where things get even wilder. Snoop's courtroom statements didn't just appear out of nowhere. They lined up with whispers that have been floating around for years. From Nipsey's close friends to Big U's own comments caught on camera. Just listen to this chilling moment from one of Nipsey's closest friends who was there the day Nipsey was taken. "Were you there that day?" The pain in his voice hits hard, and it shows why Snoop's words made people stop and think. That raw emotion from someone who lived through it sets the tone for why Snoop's testimony carries so much weight. While Nipsey's friend replayed that day over and over in his mind, Snoop forced everyone else to revisit the same haunting question. Was Big U really connected to the chain of events that ended Nipsey's life? The conspiracy theories kept building, and you can see how Big U gets defensive, almost irritated that his name is even mixed into this story. But the streets never forget, and once Snoop's testimony lined up with those long-running whispers, it felt like someone threw gas on a wildfire that was already out of control. Think about it. For years, Snoop walked a tight line, preaching peace, calling himself the King of Long Beach, while still firing shots at anyone who tried to question his name. Just listen to how he clapped back when people said he couldn't even show his face in his own neighborhood. That's not a man scared of losing respect. That's someone who knows exactly how much weight his name carries. But inside that courtroom, when the pressure was real and every word mattered, Snoop flipped the whole script. He handed over names, connections, and context. Everything law enforcement would want wrapped up on a silver plate. And let's keep it real. In the eyes of some, Snoop just crossed a line you can't walk back from. But before diving into the fallout, there's something people forget: the real humanity behind all this. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just a rapper or a street figure. He was a father, a son, a man who dreamed of building real generational wealth for his people. One of his close friends talked about how Nipsey never abandoned his neighborhood, never turned his back, even when danger was always around the corner. That's the real heartbreak here, and that's why Snoop's apology and finger-pointing cuts deep. Because if Snoop is truly telling the truth, then Big U's place in this whole situation is way more complicated than anybody wanted to admit. And if Snoop exaggerated, or even worse, twisted details to protect himself, then he just dropped a spark that could blow back on his own legacy. Either way, the fallout is straight-up explosive. And just when everyone thought things couldn't get any crazier, another twisted moment from the courtroom left everyone sitting in shock. Let's break it down. When Snoop pointed that finger at Big U, when he walked into that courtroom, most folks expected a show. They thought he'd walk in with the same smooth confidence he's been known for over the last 30 years, charm the room, and slide out untouched. They figured this was just another celebrity courtroom moment, another chance for Snoop to look like the man who always has it under control. At first, everything looked exactly how people expected. Snoop walked in calm, voice softened, posture humble. And then he hit the courtroom with something nobody had heard from him in decades: an apology. He spoke on his past, on the waves of harm that spread from his music, his words, his influence. He talked about how glorifying gang life added fuel to the violence that scarred Los Angeles for generations. For a moment, it sounded like closure, like Snoop was finally laying the old gangster image to rest and stepping into the role of Snoop Dogg, the elder statesman. But what came next wasn't closure. It was an earthquake, because right after the apology came the accusations, and the name that dropped out of his mouth was the last one people expected in that setting: Big U. The silence in that courtroom was brutal. It wasn't just that Snoop apologized, it was who he put that weight on. And not a stranger, not an outsider, someone from inside. Anyone who knows the street codes understood instantly what had just happened. To someone unfamiliar with that world, it might sound like Snoop was just speaking his truth. But to those who know how the streets move, what he did was something way more dangerous. He stepped into the territory of testimony. He crossed the unwritten rule. No names, no cooperation, no exposing the brotherhood, no matter how messy things get. That's why the label tied to that kind of move hits so hard. Because in Los Angeles, especially in the neighborhoods that raised Nipsey Hussle and Snoop Dogg, credibility is everything. You can have money, fame, global love, but if your credibility slips, you're done. Respect runs those streets, and respect can't sit in the same room with anything that looks like snitching. That's why Snoop's words didn't land like a simple apology. They hit like a bomb. Big U's name carries weight because of who he was to Nipsey. Early on, he wasn't just a manager. He was the bridge between the streets and the music industry. He gave protection, guidance, and credibility. But relationships in that world are never clean or simple. They're made of mentorship, control, trust, fear, love, and power all mixed together. And when Nipsey started rising beyond street life, becoming a businessman, an investor, a visionary, the tension naturally grew. Nipsey didn't need a street guardian in the same way anymore. His independence was his biggest strength, but it also came with risk. That distance between him and Big U became the soil where rumors started to grow. When Nipsey was murdered, those rumors exploded like wildfire. Some said it was just the tragic act of a jealous man. Others whispered about deeper betrayals, about politics, power moves, and old tensions that nobody fully understood. Big U's name kept floating around not because of evidence, but because in the streets, people believed the knife often comes from a hand that was once trusted. Big U never ran from addressing those rumors. His words show the weight he feels from them. He rejects the narrative completely, flipping it by saying the killer wasn't truly family, not truly one of theirs. It's his way of distancing himself from the implication, a way of saying, don't blame me, don't blame us, because the man who pulled the trigger wasn't really part of the circle. But even with his denial, the whispers don't fade. And when Snoop Dogg, of all people, breathes new life into that suspicion inside a courtroom, it doesn't just stick, it solidifies. The weight behind Snoop's accusation also hits harder because of the complicated bond between Big U and Nipsey. Big U himself has admitted their relationship wasn't always smooth. When asked about conflicts, he said disputes were bound to happen, even between brothers, brushing off one widely discussed incident as nothing more than a simple family matter. To death, that phrase might sound protective, but it also exposes the real tension inside the street world. Family disputes out there aren't like arguments at a dinner table. They can turn volatile, heated, and sometimes deadly. They show the messy mix of loyalty and rivalry, where someone you call a brother today might feel like a threat tomorrow. And that duality is exactly why, even with Big U's insistence, plenty of people never stopped wondering if Nipsey's story had deeper layers hiding under the surface. Snoop's role in sparking those doubts again is impossible to ignore. For years, he played both sides, the peacemaker who brought unity and the Crip who still repped Long Beach with pride. One moment he's cooking beside Martha Stewart, the next he's reminding the city that he never left his roots. That ability to move through both worlds is what gave him so much authority. But the second he stepped into that courtroom and said Big U's name out loud, he shattered the whole illusion that he could keep walking both lanes without paying a price. Some people saw it as courage, others saw it as straight betrayal. And betrayal in Los Angeles, that sticks forever. The label snitch isn't just an insult in neighborhoods like theirs, it's a brand, a stain, a scarlet letter that never fades. Once that label hits, your word crumbles, your history gets rewritten, and your place in the culture starts to collapse. The rules are harsh, sure, but they've been enforced with a toughness that kept them alive for decades. And that's what makes Snoop's words so damaging. Because it doesn't matter whether what he said about Big U is true or not. It doesn't matter whether he meant to honor Nipsey or protect himself. What matters is how the streets heard it, and they heard testimony. And testimony in their eyes is snitching, and now the fallout is hitting hard. Big U is back in a defensive stance, once again reminding everyone there's no evidence, no paperwork, no real proof linking him to Nipsey's death. When he speaks in those old interviews, his voice sounds tired, but still standing strong, like a man who's repeated the same defense 1,000 times, but knows he has to keep saying it. For Nipsey's fans, the hurt comes flooding back all over again, like Snoop dragged their pain right back to the surface. And for Snoop, a reputation he built over decades might get rewritten with one word: snitch. That's the tragedy of that courtroom moment. What could have been remembered as humility, a chance for Snoop to apologize and show growth, instead becomes the day he crossed a line many people believe you cannot cross. It becomes the day Snoop Dogg pointed at Big U. It becomes the day he gave the streets something they will never forget, how courtroom testimony reopened old wounds that never healed. The ghost of Nipsey Hussle has never left Los Angeles. Even years after his murder, his name still quiets crowds. His presence still feels alive every time his music blasts down Crenshaw. He wasn't just another artist lost to violence. He was a symbol of what could have been. A symbol of what happens when someone doesn't just make it out but comes back and pours into the community that raised him. And that's why Snoop's courtroom words cut so deep, because they didn't just accuse Big U. They pulled Nipsey's memory back into a storm of betrayal, conspiracies, and old wounds that never got a chance to heal. Nipsey's final day has been retold by the people closest to him, and every retelling feels like reopening a scar that refuses to close. To understand why the reaction is so intense, you have to understand what Nipsey represented. He was one of the rare artists who chose not to run from his neighborhood. He stayed, he invested, he built, he uplifted the same streets that shaped him. Even when success handed Nipsey every chance to walk away, he chose to stay rooted in Crenshaw. He bought property, opened businesses, and hired people straight from his block. To fans, that was real hero status, proof that you could rise without turning your back on where you came from. But to anyone who understood how the streets operate, it was also a dangerous move. Staying meant exposure. Staying meant the same loyalty you showed could one day be twisted against you. Nipsey knew that. And still, he stayed. That truth hits hard because he understood the risks and accepted them anyway. The loyalty that made him loved also made him vulnerable. And that's the heartbreaking part. So when Snoop pointed the finger at Big U, it wasn't just about one man. It was a suggestion that Nipsey's loyalty to his circle might have been the very thing that put him in harm's way. When Nipsey Hussle was taken from us outside the Marathon clothing store in March 2019, Los Angeles didn't just mourn, it froze. But what happened in the days and weeks after his death proved his impact went far beyond Crenshaw and Slauson. Tributes came from neighbors, fans around the world, and even major figures in politics and entertainment. Nipsey wasn't remembered as just a rapper. He was a builder, a visionary, and a man with a mission. One of the strongest tributes came during his memorial service at the Staples Center, a place normally reserved for title celebrations and superstar concerts. That arena turned into a temple of grief and love. Over 20,000 people filled the seats and millions watched from home. Former President Barack Obama even sent a letter that was read to the crowd, describing how Nipsey's dedication to lifting his community inspired not just Los Angeles, but the entire country. Those words hit deep because they lined up exactly with how fans saw him. An artist who stayed loyal to his roots even when he had every reason to leave. The service overflowed with raw emotion. Lauren London delivered a heartbreaking tribute about their love and the legacy he left for their kids. His mother spoke with powerful calm, urging everyone to see beyond the violence and remember Nipsey as a man of light. Friends and collaborators like Snoop Dogg and YG shared memories that showed Nipsey not as some unreachable superstar, but as a brother, a friend, a fighter who never stopped pushing. Inside the arena, the energy shifted between heavy tears and loud applause, between mourning everything lost and celebrating everything he built. Outside the Staples Center, thousands more filled the streets. Murals, candles, flowers, entire blocks transformed into living memorials. Car caravans rolled through South LA, blasting Nipsey's music, windows painted with "The Marathon Continues." Local artists started painting massive portraits of him across the city, turning Nipsey into a permanent part of LA's identity. The emotional fallout from all this reached way beyond the courtroom. Fans jumped online to express hurt, confusion, and anger. Some people said Snoop finally said out loud what many suspected, that too many powerful men stay quiet while the community pays the price. Others fired back saying Snoop had shattered his own reputation, calling him a hypocrite for claiming to stand for the streets while breaking the code that defines them. Nipsey's family ended up caught right in the center of all this, because for them, the tragedy wasn't a headline. It wasn't a debate, and it definitely wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was personal. Long before the world turned his name into a symbol, they were living the raw heartbreak of losing a son, a brother, a father, and a partner. While outsiders argued about loyalty and betrayal, they were just trying to survive the emptiness left behind by the man they loved. To the world, Nipsey became a movement, a symbol tied to conversations about loyalty, codes, and street politics. But to the people who knew him from day one, he was simply Amos, the kid they raised, the man they laughed with, the father whose absence still sits heavy in the lives of his children. And what made their pain even harder was how his death never got a chance to rest. Every rumor, every accusation, every new twist online dragged that wound open again. That moment in the courtroom felt symbolic. Nipsey had once been the face of breaking the cycle, proof that someone could rise above violence without abandoning their roots. But his murder showed that escaping the cycle isn't simple. And now Snoop's testimony showed something just as heavy. Even the legends can't outrun the weight of the code. The streets don't forget. They don't forgive. And once somebody whispers the word snitch, that label becomes permanent. It doesn't matter if you're a kid on the corner or a superstar with a global legacy. Once it sticks, it can bury you. And that's why the question sitting over the West Coast feels so heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Did Snoop's words shift the narrative forever? Did he finally force the culture to face the uncomfortable truth about loyalty and betrayal? Or did he just dig himself into a deeper hole? Trading decades of credibility for one moment of honesty the streets might never forgive? Nipsey's presence lingers over every part of that question. His legacy lives through the music, the businesses he built, the murals covering LA walls. But his ghost also lives inside the code, inside the conversations about loyalty, betrayal, and the danger that comes with speaking names out loud. And until these questions get answered, Nipsey's ghost will keep haunting not just Snoop Dogg, not just Big U, but the entire city that raised them. If you're still watching, drop a comment, smash the like button, hit subscribe, and share the video to keep the conversation going.